Tom, we start with sad news today, and that is the passing of Ed Broadbent, someone I know you knew very, very well.
Very sad news indeed. You know, the guy was really a warrior for social and economic justice. He followed on in the footsteps of David Lewis, a Montrealer, who had, of course, led the NDP for a number of years after Tommy Douglas. Famously, Lewis talked about corporate welfare bums, which was his way of saying, look, there never seems to be money in the government to help ordinary folks. Why do you always have money for corporations? And Ed built on that. Ed was an academic, first and foremost. He was a university professor. But he's somebody who had such a strongly held belief in helping the average Canadian working family. It inspired him, and he was an inspiring character. The night that I won my by-election in Outremont, I looked up and I was saying hi to some of the folks in the crowd, and the guy had come down from Ottawa just to be in that little bar in the East End where we were having our celebration. He was quite a personality, a really sterling individual, the type of person that you just don't meet anymore. And thanks to the institute that we just referenced in the newscast, of course, Aaron, his life work is going to continue through the Broadbent Institute. So that's a good thing. But may he rest in peace.
You know, it's funny when you look back on a life like that. We remember hearing his name, of course, at the time. He was involved politically for so long, Tom. And then once Jack Layton, of course, got involved as head of the party, he didn't stay on very much longer, did he? No,
he came back to really give a hand to Jack, and he got himself elected in Ottawa Centre. He beat out a fellow named Paul Dewar, who went on to become the Member of Parliament for Ottawa Centre, also passed away tragically, quite young. So it was an attempt by Broadbent to shore up Jack's leadership, and it worked. It really, it was a laying on of hands, and Jack was clearly benefiting from it. That strong support from Ed Broadbent is something that carried him quite far.
Again, may he rest in peace. Let's move on to, I feel like this story is not going away, even though I thought for a moment that it might. Trudeau's vacation over the Christmas holidays.
Please tell me why this is a story, Tom. I don't understand. It seems to me if he pays for his vacation, he gets in trouble. If someone else pays for his vacation, he gets in trouble.
It costs too much.
What's
That's the
going
problem.
on here?
Okay, well, there are two things here. One is the strict legal question, and you're right. We should be moving on from that. And the other is the perception problem. Let's start with the straight legal question. The Conservatives are trying to push this forward, saying, well, he wasn't clear with the ethics commissioner, it's an interim commissioner named Conrad von Wittgenstein, very, very respected guy. So the Liberal cabinet, people around Trudeau are saying, no, we did this by the book. We sent in, we said that he was paying for his trip. But that was a misstatement. What they were probably trying to say is he's going to reimburse the equivalent of commercial airfare to Jamaica for him and his family, which is normal. But the actual stay, which was worth about $90,000 Canadian, that was a gift from his friend. So a lot of people are trying to get that back into the news, starting, of course, with the Conservatives, because they just don't find it fair. That's the perception part of it. So on the legal side, I think that Trudeau should be okay, despite the fact that his office put out 3 slightly different versions of who was paying for what. That's just sloppy vacation, holiday time staff work that went sideways, but Trudeau's paying for it. There's one final aspect that I'll mention, and it was something that Tim Powers, who heads up Abacus Data, and I are both on the same wavelength on this one, that this to us shows that Trudeau is well past the Rhett Butler, frankly, ma'am, I don't give a damn stage. He is at the I don't give a bleep stage. He doesn't care. And when somebody is in politics and they're signaling, I don't care what the journalists say, I don't care what the public thinks, it's a sign that maybe they're thinking of moving on. Because if you're planning on staying in politics and asking those voters who can't pay their groceries because there's been so much inflation and who can't afford a house, can't afford the increases in rent and in their mortgages, you tell them you don't care, you're going to go sit there on your private white sand beach in the 14-room villa that your friend has given you on your own for the holidays. That is a disconnect with the average Canadian family, to go back to the theme we were just on with regard to broadband.
But that's nothing new for him. It's funny, I feel like he's had no real sense of optics and how things look to the average person since day one almost, Tom. And so to me, I don't really see that as an indication that he might be I think it just shows that he's the same old guy.
I don't disagree with you that he always has had a sense of entitlement, but I think that this one pushes things a little bit further than I've seen before. Because, look, he's not only been in trouble with the Aga Khan Island, where he was found to have broken the law, the fact that you and I are talking about the Aga Khan Island shows the extent to which Trudeau wasn't paying attention, because the minute he took this almost $100,000 trip, the plane breaks down. So, of course, send down another executive jet with a bunch of mechanics from the Canadian Armed Forces, and we'll fix them. And then all the journalists had so much fun tracking both planes as they flew back to Canada. That's at a stage that's beyond anything we've seen before, which is like, I get to have this stuff, and too bad. I'll add one thing that I think we've talked about before, but I sincerely believe that Canada's Prime Minister is ridiculously underpaid for the job involved. I think it's just absurd that we're paying Canada's Prime Minister 1/10 of what the average NHL player makes in U.S. dollars, and he's making it in Canadian dollars. Yeah. I think that's ridiculous. So we've got to make sure that they can live at a certain level, sure, provide security, sure. The idea of taking a government plane and then paying the commercial rate, no problem with that. But at some point, the average person just disconnects and say, really? A 10-day holiday, $100,000? Oh, it's just a gift because this is a family friend. You're not exactly going to somebody's chalet to live on a couch for a couple of days. This is something at another level, and the average Canadian is just saying, it's not on.
Yeah, I'm just shaking my head. I can't. It's like he gets it, and I'm not defending him. I don't have a political stake in this. This idea that he gets it from every side, no matter what he would have done. So
I think that was part of his thinking. I think that, he probably looked at Katie Telford, who was saying, boss, you know that this is going to be a stinking show.
Yeah.
And his answer would have been, I'm going to get it one way or the other. Yeah. Too bad I'm taking my family on a holiday.
Let it be.
But I do think that it's at such a degree this time of in your face, I don't care, that it might be telegraphing.
Okay.
By the way, I'm not going to be around for a long time.
Okay, let me pick up on that, because this is interesting, Tom. In the meantime, and I know you've talked about it too, surrounding staff, some of his staff.
I was just going to ask the same thing. He just
hired two people, right? He's got a new executive director of communications, a guy named Max Valicchetti, hired Supriya Dwivedi in that office. That doesn't seem like a sign of someone who's about to walk. That seems like a sign of someone who's about to say, you know what, I have to clean house here and put some better people in, because the messaging has been pretty awful up until now.
Well, there's nothing to stop him from trying over the next 6 months, let's say from now until June, the end of the current, term in Ottawa, to see if he can turn some of those numbers around. There was an interesting bit of movement just before the holidays. Poilievre had a particularly awful couple of weeks. He was off his game. He was saying he was going to shut down Parliament. He was behaving like a petulant child. He voted against Ukraine, a trade deal with Ukraine, because he invented a connection between that trade deal that Ukraine was really in favor of and the carbon tax. It was just absurd. And when people see that in Poilievre, he starts to tumble in the polls, because I know Poilievre, and that's the type of guy he is. He'll do stuff like this. He convinces himself that he's possessed of some greater truth. Maybe Trudeau believes that he can start building those numbers back up. I don't believe it. I think that unlike the Americans, where they have this hammered into their constitution, 2 4-year mandates, and bye-bye, we don't have that, but we don't need it, because after, he's in his 9th year, and the average Canadian is saying, you've had a great run, Mr. Trudeau, but it's not a good idea to leave the same person around for too long. Because Trudeau is essentially saying, in a year and a half, we'll have another election, and I'll ask you for another 4 years. That's not realistic.
When's the anniversary of the walk in the snow, his father's walk in the snow?
It's an easy one to retain. It's February 29th. It was a leap year 40 years ago.
And it is
so the walk in the snow is at the end of next month. I do. A lot of us have got that one circled on our leap year calendars.
I don't know. Look, worst comes to worst, Tom. He could always take the job heading up Santé, Quebec. That's $540,000 a year. So
it pays twice as much as what he's making.
Yeah, at that point, you could stay in a chalet for $10,000 a night. I mean, that'd be okay.
There is that.
Anyway, okay. Beyond that, I did want to mention one last thing, because I know you circled this today. We know there was something from the provincial government. They've been talking so much about the reorganization of course, Santé Quebec. And today, what they announced, 11 people to make up a transition committee. What do you make of this?
Well, it was interesting because, we keep talking about the importance of understanding Montreal's institutions, whether it's St. Mary's Hospital or Santa Cabrini or the Jewish General. You have to understand communities that have built up hospitals over the years, have a strong attachment to them, what the linguistic component is, what the ethnic, cultural, or religious component is to it. And sure enough, I was just looking at this list of 11 people, and it was just like, okay, this is Weston bred, right? This is... Okay, these are all folks who are, from here, who've got, they've done interesting things, but there's absolutely not the slightest attempt to reflect that diversity, the complexity of the tapestry that is Montreal, especially, half the province. And I'm saying, okay, they really are tone deaf. I don't think, and I'm letting them off the hook, I don't think that there was anybody in Quebec City who said, tough luck for the English or community or any of the others. Yeah. We don't want them here. No, I don't even think that they got to that. It was just sort of, on va mettre Jean-Guy, puis Marie-Claude, puis on va mettre ceci. And it was like, nobody was even thinking. It wasn't even part of the discussion.
Yeah, not exactly top of mind when you look at that list. No. All right, fair enough. Tom, thank you so much.
Take good care.